Hello, I'm Chris the Perfecti, also known as Chris the Contemplative, and this is a trailer for my new and upcoming series, Are You Spiritual? This will be the first episode, and the point of this series is to challenge and constructively criticize many contemporary mainstream understandings of what it means to be spiritual. And I hope to be both truthful and charitable on these broadcasts, trying to hear people out as well as giving my own insights as to what spirituality truly means. It's one of those terms where it's thrown around a lot, and people really don't have much of a classical education. They don't understand different theologies, philosophies, and religions. They don't understand the treasure of Orthodox mystical theology. They don't understand the differences between different denominations of Christians, where the theologies came from, or different denominations of other religions, to be honest. And without that understanding, they throw around a word which has taken all of human history to flesh out. The search of truth, just like anything else, takes much time and wisdom and discernment. We are very, very privileged to have so much at our fingertips in terms of the wealth of knowledge. There was a time where people weren't even literate. They just had to go along with what the priest told them. And of course, you read about the Old Testament where even the religion that most popular today, Christianity, the religion that came before Judaism was much more simplistic back then. People had a servile fear of God. There wasn't that much understanding of any sort of depth to what is truth outside of the Ten Commandments, which are all very important, and much of our society is built off of today. But they didn't have what we understand as the search for spiritual and inner truth. That was left to usually very key people and maybe a few humble shepherds that were privileged enough to experience God way out in the middle of nowhere. So, the point of this series is to educate those that they may question what they presume to be spiritual or supernatural or the depth of what is right and wrong, so that they may increase their depth and ask very important questions, that they may understand why there is a need for theology, why experience alone is not enough, especially during this time of science. We know through much of neuropsychology that the brain, in its many amazing forms and different hormones and different processing units throughout the nervous system, as well as you have in cognitive psychology, we know about things such as dopamine and oxytocin. You have these neurotransmitters that give emotions. You have different parts of the brain that are responsible for emotional feelings. We know scientifically that there are chemical processes that can induce what people can consider spiritual. So, how can we just go along with whatever we experience without testing it? In this way, I definitely agree with many skeptics. There are some hardcore atheists and agnostics who are forever doubtful, and I have to agree somewhat with them. Science proves that there must be a little bit more of discernment and testing the waters before we run around with whatever we think is spiritual. And even the ancients understood this. Even the ancients understood, well, if everyone has these different spiritual experiences, which is the right one? Throughout many religions, there have been many supposed spiritual experiences. How do we find the truth? How does it relate to the reality of human existence? And are miracles real? Are spiritual transformative miracles real? Can a person be transformed in virtue very quickly? Does God exist? Can he do great wonders? Can he confuse the minds of human beings? Does he work beyond our understanding? that those are very important questions. And if you can't answer that, then it's not going to work to simply say, oh, I feel spiritual. This feels spiritual. Now, where did this issue come from? Well, this is where we start. We start with what I consider to be the most in front of our eyes, hidden in plain sight issue that led us to an unfortunate superficiality when it comes to what is spiritual. And that is how we were raised, the culture that we were raised in. Most people that have these issues that are uneducated, unfortunately, are modern Western folk. We're talking about Western Europe have some serious issues, and people in the States, Canada, Australia, anyone that has been particularly influenced by the neoliberal post Enlightenment academic understanding, where we are raised in institutions that stress human natural knowledge in the sciences, but very little on metaphysics, on philosophy, on asking questions, objective questions, very little on classical education and how to think, how to go against yourself and challenge your own notions. All kinds of introspection. That's gone from the educational system, but it's also gone from what was supposed to be in the front of all of this, which is our churches. And what happened clearly, if you just look at what most churches today stress, is a complete abandonment of the inner truth of mankind for social programs and money. And that's where the thumbnail comes in. Jesus in a suit. Another very unknown meme. You know, people make up these memes on the image on image boards all the time, but this is very true. Okay, when people, most people go to church. So we're talking about, I would say, mainline Protestants, many evangelicals, and many Catholics. When they go to church, most of what they hear is about some kind of help the poor theology, or they hear, which is a little bit less popular now. I don't know how popular it is, but it definitely was big in the 80s. They hear prosperity gospel, where there's an overemphasis on the fact that God can bless people with material things, and it starts flirting with this very subtle idolatry of God being a genie. You know, all that matters is that God blesses you, and if He's not blessing you, then you must be doing something wrong. And unfortunately, that sounds a lot like the law of attraction and New Age things. So it can stray into some strange territories. Uh, this is, of course, connected to the Protestant work ethic, which, again, there's nothing wrong with trusting that God will provide and doing all that you can. I'm all for that. But it got a little wonky. However, that's just one side of money, Jesus. You know, it's very similar to the political divide, right? We have, I would say, the prosperity gospel represents a lot of the people on the right. You know, even people that I agree with, they are about make your wealth and God will bless you in His abundance. But on the other side, there's another Jesus in a suit. You have the left wing, the what you would call, I would say, the center left to far left. And it's also about money, except on the other side of the aisle, you have this strange mix of people. Some are these post Victorian era types who are wealthy and they feel ashamed of their wealth. They have some kind of inner guilt about it, and they want to give away wealth through the church to kind of prove that they're good Christians and good people. And then you have a lot of what's going on in the Catholic Church, which where there's not nearly as many wealthy patrons, I would say, as many in, like, say, the Episcopal Church. There are wealthy Catholics, but more or less not so much as the mainline Protestants. And they're kind of getting into this socialism, light socialism, where Again, it's all about charity is stressed, and a lot of people are envious of the rich, and they're kind of hiding it behind Jesus and liberation theology. And it's just there's this whole dynamic going on there, which is, I'd say, the most popular problem when it comes to money in Christianity. But I'm not going to go into the details here as much as the overall deception here that we've been raised in is that the church is this institution that forks money around for the poor, and that's all she wrote. And that is a complete and utter shame. It's very recent, and because we're raised in that, we become lonely because that doesn't appeal to the soul. Um, just one glaring example of this is the fact that if you really look at the condition of the poor, many of the poor are homeless, or they're struggling because they have their own inner demons. A lot of the homeless we know have issues with drug addiction, and there's all other kinds of mental illness and just things where they need to open up to God. They need to open up to a love beyond themselves. That giving money definitely can't heal all kinds of wounds. And then you have the spiritually poor. If you're raised in this, you feel very lost. You feel very kind of dark inside. It's just nature abhorring a void. And despite even those that get involved in this, we have a few members on our prayer group whose parents or even they had a past with getting involved in this understanding of Christianity, and they were never that satisfied. It felt in hindsight very fake, and it doesn't really lead you to much happiness. So it's putting the cart before the horse. Nothing, even charity for the poor, nothing can substitute experiencing the love of God and entering into his depth and entering into the cross. If you really want to be a hero, you're going to need a little personal transformation to become a saint, aren't you? A lot of the times when we get involved, we have these highfalutin notions about how wonderful it's going to be. We're going to change the world, and we realize that we're not all that we're cracked up to be. We are still angry with our neighbor. We just don't have the juice. And you'll notice that a lot of people in these I would say, overly money obsessed churches, they fall apart big time. A lot of these churches have low attendance, their children fall away, they fall away. And of course, there's the last reason, which is there are plenty of evils other than the abject poverty that involve hidden things, inner selfishness, inner desire, inner hatred, lack of forgiveness, all these things within the soul where no one is looking that make us miserable, that tells us, at least speaks to us unconsciously, that we are in need of a savior. And I hope that you will come out to this broadcast where we will just ruminate more on the conditions we were raised in, maybe even complain about them, maybe bring our own complaints. Let's be honest about the emptiness we were raised in the institutional churches, which is an awful shame. And let's recollect that if we were formed poorly, which is always a horror of human society, it is possible for entire generations to be formed poorly. It's very sad, but it's true. If we were formed poorly, then how much damage has really been done through our poor formation? How much have we lost? What kind of dark age are we in over here? And this definitely feeds into why our ideas of spiritualism is kind of wonky. I mean, we're not told anything, and you either get involved in something that's pretty empty and pretend it's all right, or anything seems to start looking good, whether it be a life of decadence and pleasure, whether it be joining your local Antifa group, whether it be some kind of seemingly spiritual um, thing like seances or crystals and new age stuff, or whether it be, it just could go on and on. So our bar is so low that lots of things seem great, and therefore we never question it because the bar is so low. We don't want to bother questioning anything else because we've been so empty for so long. A lot of things look amazing. It's really a shame. And so this is where we're going to start. And as we continue on this series, I will try my best to go up the rung of spiritual emptiness and ignorance that hopefully can open your eyes to how much depth there is in the matters of truth, in the matters of God. So take care. God bless, and God willing, I'll see you all 1 p.m. Eastern this Saturday.